Hello friends, and welcome back to our series on the story of Dwarf Fortress.
In the first episode, we talked about the prehistory of the game, and in episode 2, we focused on the 16-year period in which the ASCII version of the game was being given away for free. Today, we're going to talk about the process of bringing Dwarf Fortress to Steam, a journey that would require them to rehaul fundamental aspects of how this game was presented, namely the graphics, UI, and audio, all while retaining its complex systemic core. And we're also going to explore what happened in the exciting hours, days, and weeks after launch.
But before we get to the exciting ending, to get the game on Steam, Zach and Tarn were going to have to do something that they were historically not very good at: asking for help.
And kind of this undercurrent of putting Dwarf Fortress on Steam has been there since I met game industry people, because they're all kind of like, you could just put this on Steam and it'll change your life, you should consider it. When we actually had the health problem strike and stuff, we're like, okay, we have this bug, planted in our head about this stuff, that we do have this road out, right? But how do we actually do it? So we're not going to hire anybody. We can't do that. That requires knowledge about business stuff, paperwork, becoming an actual independent developer. Things that this is people we know do this stuff, but we don't do this stuff, and it seems to be a thing that requires some skill and knowledge in being like an actual person that does this kind of thing.
I first learned about Dwarf Fortress early on in KitFox's life, just as an oddity that a friend of mine was really enthusiastic about. He taught a Saturday workshop for 6 hours, teaching me and other friends how to play Dwarf Fortress. Honestly, I didn't boot it up again after that, because it was just the cognitive load of trying to remember how to enable the mods and how to play the game. It was just a little bit too much of a barrier for me. We also had a mutual friend through Keppa of Rocket Cat Games. And then he said, I have this friend Tarn, I think you'd get along really well. Will you be cool? He made Dwarf Fortress. And we decided we'd do a GDC talk together, talking about procedural generation, algorithms, design. And that led to Tarn and I, we did hit it off. We were friends. I pitched him. I was like, Tarn, you have an incredible game. I can't be the first person to tell you this, but you should really sell this game for $20 on Steam. And I definitely was not the first or probably the 100th person to tell him that. But I was the first person to tell him that I guess he trusted, that had a company that could do the things that would help him do those things. And he really wanted to make sure that there was a noticeable quality upgrade for the $20 price tag. He wanted to make sure there were graphics on it and sound. And I think we both were like, so are you serious about this? Like, are you ready to actually do it? I think we signed the agreement in early 2018, and then we announced it immediately because we were terrified that his deeply passionate community would somehow hear some sort of rumor and go off the deep end into mutiny, revolution. I mean, it was already a little bit fragmented, but this is some people's lives, right? Like, they do almost nothing but play Dwarf Fortress, so they're understandably very attached to their vision of what it is, what it should be, who Tarn is, and his values. And we were both very sensitive to the kind of totally normal impression that KitFox was swooping in to take advantage and Tarn was selling out and KitFox is this evil predator or something like that. Which I do think that there's an alternate dimension in which that definitely was the dominant narrative among the fan base, but thankfully we took a lot of proactive steps around not allowing that to be the discourse. Essentially, Tarn and Zach make the game. And I help find people to assist them in that, and that's it. And then the other part of it, of course, is marketing, community management. So Tarn and Zach already had their own community on the Bay 12 website. They already had their own Twitter, and all of those were active. And actually, I don't think enough people give them credit for the amount of active community moderation they were doing. But Tarn was putting in, and Zach were putting in hours and hours every month into their Patreon rewards and their communications, and they have Fortress, the future of the Fortress every month. And there's all these things that solo developers typically neglect, because you just don't have time, because you're worried, you're busy in the game. But Tarn and Zach have always prioritized communicating and being visible, and that's a lot of work.
That relationship worked out exactly like we wanted it to. I mean, they were able to secure several artists. We had at least 5 people doing art on the game total. We had at least 3 people doing music. We had some QA community testers come in from our community. And ultimately, one of the big modders became a programmer on the game, although that happened after the release.
With the support of Tanya's team at Kitfox Games, the development of the Steam version of Dwarf Fortress began. Kitfox built a support team around the brothers, texture artists, QA folks, musicians, and audio experts. A veritable assembly line of digital artisans helping to convert 16 years worth of development into something resembling a traditional looking game. The work wasn't going to be easy, and it wasn't going to be particularly fast either.
For 3 years we've been making the game like more accessible to everyone, and that means like redoing the entire interface. Before it was just ASCII, just letters and numbers on the screen, and now there's actual pictures. And with that though, the interface was complete garbage, along with the matrix that you'd have to decipher. You'd have to use WASD to move around, or no, it wasn't even WASD at that time. It was like UKLM or something. It was worse than that, and you would have those key clusters to move in one menu, and then you would have another cluster of keys. There's just no reason. It's just you have to use a different keys to move in a different menu, and this was all terrible. And for the last 3 years, we've been working with artists to make it decipherable, and ourselves to make the user interface capable of being run by normal humans.
We have a streamer who's been streaming the game for at least a decade, right? And there's this log, a chronological log, just kind of like, on the 6th we added the sutures, and on the 7th we cleaned the surrounding wound area, and on the 8th the patient was discharged, or something like that, right? And that was buried in the old version, that was buried 6 menus, key presses in, or something, just deep down where this person didn't find it.
Wow.
It just didn't know it was there, because how do you investigate this web of menus, right? And then in the new version, before we even released on Steam, we had that now just up in like a tab on a second menu, because there's so much more kind of space and mouse presses and stuff. And we just showed it off. We're like, hey, look at this cool thing. And they were like, I didn't even know that existed. Is that new? And we're like, no, it's not new. It's been there forever since we added hospitals.
We added things like whether the dwarves are happy. Now there's a little line of smiley faces and a number that tells you which dwarves are happy and how well your fortress is doing. Like the character sheets, that's completely new. Now you bring up the character sheet of the dwarves and it tells you like everything about its thoughts and all that stuff. And that was in menus before. I think you had VPL was how you'd arrange their profession, like what they're allowed to do. And now you don't even do that anymore. Now they just do the job that makes the most sense for them to do. And then before that was a mess.
What was VP and L doing? V was like...
It's view the dwarf, P the preferences, I believe, and then L for labor. So what is the preferred labor you want them to do? But most of the time, this is so bad that most of the time these letters don't represent anything. It's just a random letter to get you into a different part of the menu.
The art, I think, it must be in the tens of thousands sprites at this point, because I mean, it's a little bit cheating, right? Because what ends up happening is that for a chainmail shirt, you need like versions of that chainmail shirt. Like you need 5 slightly different ones for quality level. You need a different one for elves and dwarves and humans and kobolds and whatever. You need different ones. Now, I do think that they cut down on the number of sprites by making it palletized. There's a lot of things that the color will dynamically change depending on the material it's built with. But it's always growing because... I asked Tarn and Zach recently, I asked them, shouldn't we wind down the artists a little bit, like, until we have another big update? And they were like, no, but there's infinite things they could work on. They could work on the giant baby versions of all the animals, right? Like, what is a giant baby anteater or a baby giant anteater? I think those are 2 different things. I said, so you want sprites for those? And they said, well, why not? And I couldn't give them a good answer. So I said, all right, I guess we have art forever. And that's fine. And because then you need zombie as well. You need giant baby zombie animals.
And then here's all the babies. So we got that's ridiculous. Okay, yeah. Sometimes this artist takes the liberty to make things cartoony, like with the worm man. They have a little bow tie and stuff like that, and we're just like we go with it every time. So we're going with it. Look at that rhino baby. And then there's a little hippo baby. And then the spider monkey baby and the white stork. So we've done all of the baby animals now. We've had Neo Rice is Good drawing baby animals for weeks now. And I just sent them the last, aside from one, last 3 sheets, which are the aquatic creatures, the large aquatic creatures, and the giant aquatic creatures. And the mer people are in that set, and we're asking for 4 mer people pictures, because mer people are one of our, like most of our aquatic creatures are like a shark or something, right? But mer people, we have 2 gender pictures for them. And so we need children and babies, because they're kind of humanoid, you know, so the most humanoid creatures, even like the cyclopses and giants and stuff, like the intelligent humanoid type creatures, get a baby and a child, whereas most animals get just a young version. And so that's why we have these like cyclopes, or how do you say the plural in Greek? I have no idea. And these ettins with like pacifiers and diapers walking around too, because they have a baby version. And there's the Minotaur, that's a little Minotaur, like nose ring pacifier thing. So it must have been at this phase at one point, it's like the baby Minotaur phase before they threw it in the labyrinth. And so I don't know what we're gonna get. That's like something that could be sitting on my Discord right now, is like, what do the mer babies look like?
But there won't be any harvesting of mer baby bones.
People have probably figured out how to do that, so I'm afraid there probably will be, but it won't be official vanilla behavior. But yeah. I mean, it's like veal or something, right? I mean, mermeat.
Mermeat.
But let's look at some of these fantastical creatures and see what the interpretations were. So there's a jabber, there's a little jabber chick. And the little cave crocodile. That was good. The blind cave bear is just sitting there.
Is it cool to see work getting done that's like you didn't have to do it? It's like free work in a way. Like it's well, it's not free, but
No, it's a whole different feeling being like, I guess, like we were saying, an art director or project lead, that kind of thing, and just watching people do their thing, doing a thing that you could never have done. Like even if we were like training as pixel artists for 8 years. Like we'd get better at it, but we wouldn't be producing this, right?
We also aren't 3 of ourselves.
Yeah, this is amazing. So we did what was probably a reasonably smart thing, and set an October 26th deadline to lock the game down, which isn't actually how it turns out, but at least you can kind of get it kind of locked down by then. So the artists weren't under any particular stress. Music was done. Most of the coding that needed to be done was done. We had a pretty chill, lead up to launch, and just pressed the button, and everyone was kind of relaxed when we did it. We had a little party. We had a little group call, and the Kit Foxers had their little champagne glasses out and stuff. And it was a nice moment. No panicking or anything. And then you just kind of watch what happens after that, right?
by the time the boys had worked on the Steam version, they were experts at making this game. Not only that, they were also supported by other developers who were themselves knowledgeable about the world of Dwarf Fortress. How it should look, how it should sound, the bugs that are likely to arise. Even though they are planning to sell Dwarf Fortress, the classic mode without the updated sound and graphics was still available to download for free on Bay 12 Games' website. In fact, the team has continued to keep parity between both the free and paid versions of the game to this very day. They did everything right, but this was new territory for any game's release. How would a title that had been available for free, and arguably still was, sell in 2025? Were there new fans willing to give it a go? Or was the success of Dwarf Fortress destined to be one of a cult classic? A game which had gotten the attention of the Museum of Modern Art and the New York Times, but ultimately didn't have an audience.
Sales numbers, you get an hourly graph that you can actually watch, and you can see the countries wake up and stuff, the ones where you're popular, and it just looks like a sine wave. And so yeah, we knew immediately that the game was being fairly well received, also because the like every half hour or so, the global and country-based like sales lists will be there, and we're like #1 globally for a few days or whatever. And well, you know you're doing pretty good when you're outperforming every other game on Steam.
Within 24 hours of the release of the Steam version of Dwarf Fortress, it had sold 160,000 copies. They'd almost double this by the end of the week. And 4 months after launch, 600,000 units of Dwarf Fortress had been sold. Most fans watching the launch hoped that it would sell enough to help the brothers gain more financial stability. Nobody had quite expected this.
You knew that you'd eventually sell it. Did you think it would do as well off the bat as it did?
No, I had no idea that it would be this crazy. We were just expecting to, be able, to not have to worry about, like, to have a job that had health insurance. We expected something like that, but no, this just completely blew everything out of proportion.
We had no idea. That this is what was going to happen. And it feels really good. As somebody who has dealt with housing instability my entire life, I am so grateful. Like, I'm just so grateful for the ability to even be able to do this. Like, I can't even express like what that, I just don't even have words for the feeling. Like, it just, I feel so at peace and just so excited for the future. We couldn't have done it without Dwarf Fortress. We couldn't have done it without the fans. And I'm just so grateful for these like hundreds of thousands of people that I don't even know. Like, and I've only met a handful of them.
We were renting this tiny little house, and that we had a dog, 2 cats, and an iguana that we're taking care of in this tiny little house. And then we're moving into a house that's, 10 times as big or something like that. It's just huge.
Zach and Annie had just gotten the keys to their brand new house when we conducted these interviews back in the early spring of 2023. It's by no means a mansion, it's a nice, modest home, but considering where they had lived before, it probably felt palatial. Similarly, Tarn had got himself a nice apartment in nearby Bainbridge, but months after moving in had barely gotten any furniture into it. Money, it seems, wasn't really changing these guys.
Actually we were shopping for furniture for this place, and we went the one furniture shop that's on the strip down here. And we walked in there, and like a little metal end table, we looked at it and like, okay, this has got to be worth 50, at most $100 or something like that. And it was like 1,500, and we're like, okay, see you guys later. They're like, bye-bye. I'd rather help people out than to buy a bunch of stuff for myself. I mean, I brought that house. The house is outrageous.
It's an investment though, right?
It is an investment, right? Maybe the car we bought wasn't, but we've bought 2 cars for our family members. We've done. We're gonna just help out everyone we can, because charity begins at home, I think is what they say. And it's just, it feels great to be able to do that kind of thing.
Does everything just feel strange still?
It's just like Quantum Leap. Yeah. This is not my life. This is a different life, and I'm just kind of adjusting to it. So the game does well, right? I mean, the game sells 500,000 copies in the first month. And so you have to start dealing with that, right? It's not immediately, because Steam, a month passes for them, and of course you can return games and stuff after a couple weeks, right? So they wait for a whole month afterwards. So this is all through January that they're like, okay, let's just let these refunds cool down for December and stuff. And it makes sense, right? It's the only way they could do it. And then they just sent Tanya like $9 million. And so we're like, okay, so what do? We have to send you an invoice. And so they sent me an invoice to show me what it looks like. I've never sent an invoice in my life. We just went into Miro and drew a rectangle and drew the things and typed the invoices in and stuff. And then you can put a frame on it and export it as a PDF. And so I got this PDF and I just sent it by email back to KitFox, and they're like, hey, cool. And then they had our bank information, so they just sent us, $7.2 million the next day. It took 2 hours from Canada down to us, and so that's just sitting in our business account, right? And so we there's some business expenses, especially just the tax that we have to pay on that as a business. But also, I mean, because of how our thing is structured, like Zach and I just split that. That's just how it works. So we needed to figure out how to split that much money And obviously you go into the bank in person, right? So we walked into the local branch, and we got elevated from the teller to an actual banker, right? Who happens to be someone that my sister-in-law babysat, right? It's in a small town. And so we were just catching up with them and stuff, and then saying like, oh, by the way, our lives have changed a little bit. And there's like, or whatever. So there's all this money. And then you're like, okay, so we need to transfer this amount of money. And they're like, well, I can't do that. How can they do this? And they're like, well, my manager can't do it. Their manager can't do it. Their manager can't do it. We're going up to the bank's like national office at this point to get this money transferred. The bank calls us up and is like, okay, so I can go through this 2-hour approval process, but because of how your y'all's business is structured, you should just try it on the phone because it's actually permissible to transmit up to $10 million. I'm like, on the phone, really? So I just picked up my phone. I was sitting in the backseat of their car. I just picked up my phone. It was like 3400,000.00, flip to the personal account, and it just popped over there instantly.
The nominees for Strategy/Simulation Game of the Year are...
We were nominated for Simulation Game of the Year. We got to sit next to the creators of Elden Ring, who went up and won many awards, but then in the middle of it, we got our award, and then I walk up with Tarn to receive the award, and then we had been like hyping ourselves up the whole time. We're gonna win, and we're gonna give a speech, and I had been drinking, and I completely forgot what I was gonna say, but I ended up just, my parents watched it, and they're like, that's a great speech, did you write all that down? And I'm like, no. I just said it.
All right. On behalf of my brother, the genius, we couldn't have done this without the fans who supported us for 20 years. Just for no reason. They didn't have to give us any money. But they did. And then a publisher picked us up, Tanya Short, Kid Fox Games, and made this for everyone. Everyone can play this now, not just people that can read ASCII and program in Linux. Everyone. So thank you. Thanks.
This would be a great place to end this story. Two brothers who became millionaires overnight, not out of charity, but because of over 2 decades worth of blood, sweat and tears that they'd poured into this project.
This was originally where I planned to end the story, but in spending time with the boys, with Annie, and talking to their friends and colleagues, it felt like this was much the start of a story as the end of one. Tarn had truly dedicated his adult life to Dwarf Fortress, and in so doing he had sacrificed significant aspects of life and living. Tarn was now a mid-40s millionaire, but he had never been in a serious relationship. He'd spent most of the past decades working on this game and hanging out with his brother. And while he had thought about dating over those years, something always held him back. Something that perhaps now he was finally able to move past.
Now, this is supposed to be a slow loris, which is a type of primate, but...
Looks like a grumpy cat.
Yeah, what the hell is this thing? So we had to get it. That's probably the gimmick, but... Because it's got like a hump, like a kind of a bear too, or whatever. Like in real life, they don't. They just look like a little, prosimian primate. I was like, well, I live in the middle of nowhere, and I don't have a car, and I'm just sitting here working with my brother on this game, and I'm not going to be able to go out and meet people or anything like that. And I'm also like, have this whole online persona. Everyone's reading every word that I say and so forth. And I'm like, I've just figured in kind of a pessimistic way, the thing that's going to happen is I'm going to put up a profile and I'm going to see it online in 3 days. And it's going to be this whole thing I have to deal with or whatever. And I'm like, I'm just going to work on the game. It's a bit of a hassle or whatever, which is not a healthy attitude. Not a healthy attitude at all. I'm sure I could have worked it out. We'd always do this. We've had this for years now. We just pick it up and then we rotate it 90 degrees at somebody because it's just like a good effect.
Oh yeah, right? Do the look. It's good.
Oh, you want me to do it? You want me to turn it again?
Yeah, make it turn.
Yeah, and I was thinking of putting a picture of me and Sloran on the dating app, and then I'm like, no, this is too much for anybody. This is like 6 months in, you can fucking introduce them to what we're really like. Whether or not this kind of like what would be called self-abnegation, this nullification or whatever of myself that came through the working on the project, whether it was necessary at all, is an open question. I don't think we can just say, oh no, you should have been doing more stuff for yourself or whatever. Maybe the game would have failed. You don't know. And now I'm that things are going so traditionally well. I don't second guess it. I'm like, things are good. We did what we maybe didn't have to do, but we did what we did to get there.
And you've no regrets?
I mean, it's my life has not repaired itself entirely, so I'm waiting to see if I regret things. I've given myself about 6 months here to see how things go before I think about it.
The financial success of Dwarf Fortress did more than just help these guys get some decent insurance and, get on the property ladder. It was doing something really important for Tarn. For the first time in as long as he could remember, he could think about something else other than working on the game.
One of the nights myself and Tarn grabbed dinner, he was texting somebody he'd just met on a dating app. He'd bought himself an Aran jumper so he had something nice to wear if they met up sometime. I asked him over dinner that night about what he was going to buy with all this money, but he didn't really have an answer. Tarn didn't seem interested in cars or fashion or even high-end PC hardware. But I pushed him on it. I wanted to know what his dreams were, what he thought he could do now that he couldn't do before. And he mentioned maybe getting himself a new guitar. Years ago, Tarn had bought himself a guitar to teach himself how to play Spanish style, and it's on this guitar that he wrote and recorded the original Dwarf Fortress theme. So the next day, we took a day trip to Seattle. We took a ferry from Bainbridge Island to the city. We got food at his favorite curry restaurant just by Pike's Place Market. And we took the subway to a guitar center over by the University District. Tarn browsed the selection for a few minutes and then eventually spotted something he liked, grabbed the guitar, sat down, and played.
How's that go? Where's he
Tarn didn't buy a guitar that day, not wanting to waste the cash on one that he wasn't sure about. He said that when he picked up the right guitar and played it, he'd know if it was the one. In leaving Poulsbo that evening, I felt like I had been a spectator to a very weird time in these people's lives, a sort of a bridge between the old version of life and this new one ahead of them, one that seemed exciting but scary and different in ways they couldn't quite pin down.
Tarn had given himself 6 months to figure out his love life, while Zach and Annie were attempting to extend the comfort that they now felt to their friends and family around them. But unfortunately, things didn't exactly go to plan.
Version 50 had finally launched, but it had focused on the game's Fortress mode. Before they could start once again adding new functionality into Dwarf Fortress, they would first need to update the other half of the game, Adventure mode. This would require more help, more graphics, more sound, and more time. But Adventure mode was far from the biggest challenge facing the brothers and their family.
In the next and final episode in this series, we cover the 2-year development of Adventure Mode and everything else that happened in the background during that time, why I felt like I needed to extend this series to one more episode, and why I flew back up to Paul's boat to interview everybody one last time. You can go watch that video right now if you want over at patreon.com/noclip, and a massive, massive thank you to everyone who has supported us during the run of this series. For everyone else, we'll see you next time. And it's a game that was always going to have a long tail in terms of development, regardless. It's
not even a tail. We're working on the damn thing, right? It's not a tail. It's the body of the beast. We are not gotten to the tail yet. We're working on ribs and shit, right? It's like, we haven't even put out adventure mode. Right. Like adventure mode comes out, suddenly this game is an RPG. You slap the RPG tag on it or whatever, and then like a whole new set of people. I don't even know what that's gonna do.